Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a lovely lunch break. I know I definitely did. It's always interesting having these conferences now virtual, but here's hoping for the next one we'll be back in a lovely function centre or somewhere similar where we can have some networking and the like when these conferences return and obviously a new level of normal. I want to introduce our next panel for this afternoon, which is going to focus on how to build a culture of disruption advocacy to facilitate your digital capability. Our panelists today come from different backgrounds and very varying industries, from Toll Group to the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, and of course 86400, who you might have heard from yesterday. Some of the key topics they'll be going through is confronting risk aversion to driving AI beyond a low-level complexity applications, looking at the digital workforce as well, and in addition, upskilling and permeating a culture of learning and agility and outcome focus. Fine, these all sound like very, very big words, but I will hand over now to someone far more capable than I to facilitate the conversation. I'd like to introduce Catherine Payne, who's Executive Director of Digital and Customer Communications at the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. Catherine, welcome today, and over to you.
Thank you, and it's great to be here. Hi to all of you. I can't see any of you. I can at least see my panelists, so I'm really thrilled to be here today for what is a topical conversation, particularly with the current pandemic. And I think we've seen a lot of changes we might not otherwise have seen, which is pretty exciting. So to put a bit of positive light on it, I think you can always learn from a crisis, and we've had no better opportunity in the last year to really experience things differently and do things differently. And I think all of us on this panel, I'm sure all of you have stories of change, and I think in a lot of cases positive change. My background is very much digital communications and customer experience, and I've been with the Victorian government for about 5 years, leading in the department. As mentioned earlier, it's such a big name, I'm not going to say it all again. But look, it's been exciting to, after a career in corporate, to go into government and have an opportunity to be a change agent. And I guess that's what I'd like to bring to the conversation today, is that government has been a bit probably slower in some areas than corporates and other organisations, but is catching up and realising that the community, the staff are requiring that. And I think to frame today's discussion, and I'll invite my panellists in a second to introduce themselves and tell a little bit of their story before we get going. But today we really wanted to explore the steps to embedding digital as a norm and how we've approached the change. And I want to just again reiterate that the year we've had has been extraordinary and again provided us with some exciting opportunities. And I'm sure many of you may have questions from the floor, then please put them in the chat so we can respond to those through this, what we hope is an interactive discussion. So firstly, I might just ask Stuart Robertson to introduce, and welcome, Stuart.
Thanks, Catherine. Hi all. So effectively I'm from Toll Group. My role is Head of Business Partnering for Customer and Digital Domains. And really my remit is to introduce technologies and processes to the business that can enable business transformation, innovation, as well as product development. I've historically, though, got a very long history in consumer goods, so that's been my background. Also in the digital space, so looking at both from a field force automation, customer relationship management, e-commerce, B2B, customer portals, that type of technology suite. And I've been at Toll for about 3.5 years. Our original remit was to establish a digital center of excellence to deliver one of our major e-commerce platforms, which is done. And I've kind of handed that off and now focusing on the next set of journey, which will look at some of the things around intelligent automation, low code, no code, app development, as well as data science and AI moving forward in Toll. So an interesting space to be in at this point in time.
Thanks, Stuart. I'm looking forward to hearing more about some of those. And then, of course, Dan Bridgman, over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Catherine. So, hi everyone. It is strange not being able to see your faces, but I hope you're having a good afternoon. My name's Dan Bridgman, and I lead up the data science function within 86400. For those that haven't heard of it, it's a smart bank. We have a mobile application that we are as a fully instituted bank to allow, deposits and loans, etc. And I look after essentially anything to do with data and the analysis of it within the mobile itself, and then also for our internal business functions as well. I've been here for about a year and a half. It's been an incredibly interesting journey for a digital native, I think would be fair to call us last year. I'm sure we'll talk about that later on. But having worked previously at PwC and consulting firms, it's interesting seeing digital transformations happen and sometimes not happen as well, and the reasons why they don't happen. So yeah, I look forward to sharing some of the thoughts and ideas. Yeah.
Thank you. So look, let's get going. I'm sure many of you will have questions, so please just put them in the chat so we can have an engaging conversation. But to get us going, I think, there's no doubt that many of us have increased and intensified the migration to digital, as I said, in the year that we just had, and more of us are working remotely. Look at us all today. I'm in one of my bedrooms hiding away, and many of you probably got a story in the backdrop. Mine looks a bit dull today, but again, as we've thought about this, the focus too on analytics and AI initiatives, and we'll touch on that today. But I really wanted to ask the panel, what have you noticed most in the year that we've just had in terms of change?
I'll give it a go to start. I think the one thing that we've seen a fair bit in Toll is really acceleration in the introduction and adoption of tools just to enable the workforce. I think we heard about this yesterday as well. So, we've come from a very large legacy and aged estate. So moving to the latest, Microsoft suite with tools like Teams and the online SharePoint, etc. So that whole suite, we've really accelerated that. So we were, tracking and it was running and we were all happy and people were slowly getting things. But when we got into lockdown, the need to accelerate that just happened overnight. And so it was a great catalyst. We'd probably still be doing it if that hadn't happened. But it also, provided, I suppose, from an IT function view of the world to show to the business, look, we can move faster, we can get things done, and we can give you capability quite quickly. So I think the adoption of tools internally just to help with collaboration, keeping connected with your teams, keeping them motivated, keeping them focused, those type of tools and capabilities for us, it's been a major change.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Stuart. I mean, 86400's landscape is quite different to bigger legacy organizations. And I mean, we were in a fortunate position where a decision was made by our LT to go from working, within the office to fully from home within a day or two. And we had the digital tools to allow us to do that. But I think what's been really interesting in the last year and a bit is that when you are fully digital, when you're all working from home, you begin to miss the social elements of the teams bonding. You don't have the same water cooler chats. You don't have the same laugh and about things, within the office. So we've done a few different experiments and a few different things that have not always worked, but sometimes have worked, just to kind of bring that back in, and also have a checkpoint like Stuart was just saying on a fortnightly basis to just check how the morale of staff is, how they're going with the work they're doing, and if they need any help and that kind of stuff. I think is absolutely imperative. Also interesting in that we haven't slowed down, and it's actually really surprising considering you think that you don't see people as frequently. Some things have actually sped up. Communication is still a challenge at times, but it's been really, really interesting to see how something such as the pandemic doesn't actually slow down a business when they can go fully digital as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting comment. Like from our perspective, government, we've been at the epicenter of the crisis in Victoria. So we've had a huge increase in workload. And so one of the major narratives we have is workload. And the productivity has gone up, but people are working longer and harder. And that's a huge thing going into 2021 around the remote working has worked so well. Many of our staff don't even want to go back to the office, but there also is this issue of balance and how do we support our people. So the changes in the areas of focus for leadership has been significant, driven by the change in the way we work, the adoption of digital. We couldn't get people to use digital tools before the pandemic, and suddenly overnight, just as Stuart and Dan have said, it just happened, and people didn't find it so scary. And we were very grateful in our department that we actually had invested in a digital transformation in 2016 to 18. Otherwise, I'm not sure what we would have done. It would have been a lot harder, but it does show that, you know, businesses do need to invest and plan ahead for situations like what we've seen. But again, what I'd just like to make another comment on change in the way we've worked is that we saw engagement with leadership in our department rise by 3 percentage points, and it was ahead of any other department. But what we saw was leadership really embrace technology to engage with staff, and the level of interaction with executives increased. And that was fascinating from a corporate perspective to see that connection. You were seeing the secretary at home, the dog walking through the picture. There was a connection of people in a different way. In a hierarchy organisation, that's often a big thing, is the digital world really took that away, and that was exciting and I think really, really positive for the organisation. So there's just a few thoughts from a government perspective to add to the comments that my colleagues have made. Look, we've got a couple of other questions, but I see Graham Christie, you've asked a really good question, so we might go to that before we keep going. And Graham's question really is, what do you think are the main resourcing and funding considerations when trying to balance transformation initiatives with keeping BAU positively tracking? A really good question. Dan, do you want to have a
go? So resourcing and funding considerations, I think it comes back to it always comes back to the business outcomes and the value that the business is looking to deliver. Okay, so in our case, it was still within the growth of 86-400, and therefore we continued with the resources for the development of tools internally that within our own application. That being said, we've had a massive growth within our loan space, so that particular area has grown. It's not changed. I don't think there's been any additional kind of resourcing considerations there. I think that's something that was just kind of a par for the course. There wasn't anything that I'm kind of privy to, particularly in the data science space at least.
And Stuart, you talked a lot about centres of excellence, which is probably relevant to this Graham's question, actually. I think you're on mute.
No, can't hear me?
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, we took quite a hard line to get that balance. You know, first 3 years, 2017, for about 3 years, we spent 450 million on transformation, massive investment. You know, over that 3-year period. But what we needed to do coming out of that into the BAU world is make sure that we actually secured the funding from a BAU perspective to keep ourselves and the investment we've made, you know, contemporary, up to date, secure. So we've gone in and fought quite hard to keep investment to maintain what we've put in. But on top of that, we've also taken a different lens on the transformation component. So it doesn't all have to be $50 million investment, $100 million investment. And some of the stuff that I'm doing around intelligent automation, it actually can drive significant business value at a relatively low cost. So we're trying to balance again, you know, what are the business outcomes, what's the value going to be achieved, and how can we deliver that a little bit differently than, you know, from a traditional trans perspective.
Do you think it's important to have separate teams, or, as you say, you know, different horses for courses, depends on where the business is at in terms of the approach?
Yeah, you definitely, and it's a maturity question as well, right? So at Toll, we've, you know, again, if you invest in 150 million on one program of work, you're going to run it in a waterfall fashion. You've got all your stage gates, you've got all your governance bodies, you've got the whole shooting bang match lined up. Whereas what we're doing now is you've got to have that second speed IT, right? You've got to be able to deliver value quickly, effectively, efficiently, and at a low cost. And that's where the COEs and the Center of Excellence come in, because they use, you know, DevOps, and we use agile techniques, and we actually deliver differently. But you do need those. Most big organizations will have those kind of extremes. So you definitely need different ways, and then different teams focus on different outcomes. So we'll grow and train and upskill and resource for those different areas. So the AI team is going to look very different to the low code team. So we need to make sure we balance the skills.
I'm completely with you, Stuart, when it comes to the maturity, because comparing Toll and 86-100 is not the same. One is an apple, one is an orange, or one is a basket of apples, oranges, etc. But I mean, the thing is that we've found that again, it comes back to value, but we've changed the way that our development teams work internally, and it's all about the value first off, and then iterating on that, and having a process or a mechanism in place that allows you to develop and iterate on something every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, there's something that's coming up. There's new features internally or new features for our customers, for the bank. And that's so important, because we can't rely on having a waterfall style process. It just takes too long. There's too much investment, and there's not always the necessary gain you may get at the end as well. But again, it comes from a different kind of age of company, I think. So yeah.
Well, to have the government perspective on that, in 2016, when we got about 20 million, which was a lot of money at the time, and it was 3 years, the CIO and I partnered. And I think that was something that was really important, is having partnership with two different parts of the business to drive the change. And I brought sort of the communications and the digital piece and the customer, because I had a customer element to my role, and then we had the CIO and her team. But we had a big focus on governance, being government, and that was really key to the way we set up the project. We did have to bring outside skills in to resource the program, and probably more of our money was spent on that than we would have liked, but we didn't have the skills inside the organisation. And then by the year 3, what we tried to do was transition into BAU the delivery of the final year, so that the learning and the knowledge was transferred into the business. And we did find that we had a really tough year, first year, because we're a regional government agency as well, department, so a lot of resistance. And the change process we underestimated in year 1, and the resourcing for the change element of the project. It was very much IT focused and digital. And what we realised is actually the people element was really fundamental. And I think many of you would be shaking your heads in agreement with that. So we learnt a lot, and the negativity was really hard at first. It's like there's so many more things they wanted to spend their money on. But as luck sometimes has, a crisis can be an opportunity. We had a fire in our head office that meant that everyone had to leave. It's about 1,800 people. And thankfully, due to the digital work, everyone was set up. And that just suddenly meant that people had an experience of difference that made the importance of the why change, why invest, and being very clear up front about that, so that people understand why you're funding and resourcing the way you are, and you're bringing people on the journey. So I think, going to your question, Graham, I hope we have given you some answers, and don't hesitate to give us any feedback in the chat. But it is a balance, and every organisation is different, I think, is probably the wrap on that from a panellist's perspective. Any other comments, panellists, before we wrap up on that one? Good. Okay, so I might go to a question that I might start with you, Stuart, around, you've been doing a lot of work around AI, robot process automation, and I'd like you to just tell us a little bit about Toll's journey in that space, and how you got buy-in for the change in approach, and what are some of the things that you've learned and your people have learned along the way.
Yeah, sure. So we've actually, it's one of those technologies, right, that's been around for a while. Yet it's always interesting, because internally in an organization, we'll see it as, it's innovative, right? It's innovative technology, but it's been used for a number of years. It's well-proven technology. But even then, to get people's buy-in, and even as a starting point, right? And one of the things that we were very conscious of is we didn't want to go technology-led and try to find a problem. We actually wanted to find a business problem. What are they trying to achieve, and how could we align and get the outcome for them? So we luckily, identified very like-minded stakeholders who were open to technology, didn't have a preconceived solution in their head. They just had a problem that they wanted to solve, and they wanted to drive operational and process efficiencies. So we actually started with a very small proof of concept. We got a couple of vendors. We stood up the tech. We documented what we wanted to do. We showed the business, that yes, the technology works. This is what it can do for you. And actually, just by taking them through that process, has really helped them not only understand and be open to the adoption, but they've also become advocates for that. So I think for me, it's critical to start with the right problem to show that it can add value. Because the moment people see the value, that just grows. We've now have quite a large backlog of automations, and we've not really pushed it hard. We've not been knocking on doors and kicking doors down. A lot of the work has been coming to us. And it's by getting those people with, the right mindset, if you like, to get behind you, support, and then advocate. But you have to start small. If we went in and said, oh, we want a massive program, we want to automate, 1,000 processes, we would probably still be looking at a business case or still trying to document it in some shape or form. But starting very small, very focused, showing the COO, showing our global leadership team, what the value behind it is. I think that was just helped us get the foothold and then grow from there. And I think another important thing around this, especially around technology, is the messaging. So I've deliberately tried to stay away from, oh, this is innovative and exciting, because senior managers, right, they just see that as risk. They see that as an unknown versus this is a known entity. It's a known product. We know and we can see these use cases. We can see our competitors. We can see other, companies out there leveraging. That just paints a very different picture to us trying to say we're innovative and trying to drive an innovation agenda. So a lot of that. Then probably the other important point is around, don't assume. I get excited and I want to chat about the technology, not realizing that not everyone's going to have the same level of understanding of what we're talking about. So education about what it is you're trying to do and how it can help. It's definitely something you don't want to gloss over. You want to make sure that you've taken people, again, along that journey and you've educated them. And the other side of that, people are going to have their own experiences. So we often heard, oh, yeah, but we tried this 3 years ago. It didn't work. Well, things have moved on quite, at a fast pace in 3 years. And again, it's about breaking down some of those preconceived ideas and then, educating them and then building them back up. And probably the last thing is around accountability. So I'm from the technology function. So yes, we'll provide you a platform and capability and we will, deliver and run. But ultimately what we've been very clear about, this is a capability we're providing to the business. The business needs to be accountable for the outcomes of that. So, yes, we handhold and we'll take them through the process. But the value outcome is in the business. That's where we're going to see the value. We've got to make sure that the accountabilities are right. Otherwise, you just won't, get very far if it's not set right. And that's probably the kind of key things that I've focused on and I found have worked and got people behind the agenda.
Thank you. Dan, anything you want to add to that?
No, I guess things to add just on the point of value, because I completely agree with Stuart, is that it's much easier to proceed with a piece of work or initiative once you've got some initial momentum from a quick win. And that could be a low-hanging fruit or something. But as soon as you've got a bit more momentum and a bit more understanding from your execs or your senior managers, etc., it makes the rest of the process much smoother. Because often you might be pioneering new ground. For us, that's been the case, and it's about taking people on the journey and explaining technology as if with no disrespect they were 5, because sometimes it makes it easier just to get the point across, right? So I think doing that and just and giving people sometimes the autonomy to think about things slightly differently, rather than just this is the way it's been done before. So you might have already inherent biases, etc., but taking different skill sets and different people from different teams may not be the quickest way initially, but given some time and trust is actually really powerful.
And you mentioned, I think, in some prep work we did about the importance of upskilling, permeating this culture of learning, agility, outcome focus. Can you give us a little bit of a story of what you've done in your organisation in that respect?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the example I use is the hackathon. We've had a recent hackathon, and the backlog of development teams we have here is much bigger than we have the resource to handle, which is the case in most busy organizations, right? But the hackathon has surfaced up some really, really neat ideas for the business to kind of use either internally or for our customers. And all that really took is all the tech team and some of the design and other elements of the company downing tools for a day or a day and a half and just working together. And that this is within a company. It's essentially a tech company, but there's nothing to stop other companies from doing exactly the same, because that cross-pollination, getting people to understand, and tech people and working with non-tech people is really powerful, because you then get to see how their shoes fit. When you're working alongside them. And we've had some really good ideas that have actually come through the backlog, and they've actually been promoted up to be, the next features that are going to be going into our banking application. So it's incredibly powerful, and it doesn't take much. It just takes people in a room, some pizzas and maybe some soft drinks, etc., and add a bit of time. So that can be incredibly powerful if it's harnessed right. And then you just surface it with the business, for the problems or what they're looking to do. So yeah, that's been particularly powerful for us.
That's really good. I mean, both of you have really touched on, I guess, some of the key elements of the topic we're here to talk about today. But I think with about 4 minutes to go, there's probably a bit of a sum up from all of us. But really, in the steps to embed digital, what we're seeing is that planning is important. People are really important. And a mindset that is really open to change. And of course, the big one is the investment, financial investment as well. I guess I'll just ask my panelists probably to sum up in sort of, are there 3 things you'd say really, really matter in embedding digital and approaching change in the process of becoming more digital?
Yeah, I think from my side, it's about changing that conversation. We've always come from a very traditional IT. Tell me what your requirements are. The ability to. We all love those. It's probably telling my age. Versus, what are you actually trying to achieve? What is the outcome that we actually want? And be open to what that solution is, because it doesn't have to be, an apple. So I think changing that conversation, being really focused on what the outcome is, and then you work to that outcome. And not to the, a simple feature list or an ability to type business problem.
I'm with you, Stuart. I think
the
value side of things, but I think start small, as you've said, and iterate as fast as you can. Because if you know you're going to fail, or if you don't know you're going to fail, but if you're going to fail, you'll fail sooner, and you'll know whether it's not worth pursuing there as well. And I think the last year has told me one thing, and that is expect the unexpected, which is ridiculous to say, right? Because you just can't predict what's going to happen. But at the same time, if you have some flexibility, you can handle anything.
So I think change is the word that people have really got used to, and well, it kind of is something we're all living with and maybe getting more used to. I think it's been a pleasure today to have our colleagues and have this conversation. I hope that the people listening have found it of value, and I mean, certainly link up with us on LinkedIn if you want to share more of your own stories with us. We'd be, I'm sure, really interested to engage with you through that forum as well. With a minute to go, is there anything else that anyone would like to add? I'm ahead of schedule, my goodness. So, I don't know, are there any things that we've learned we haven't learned?
Well, that's a long story.
Going back to the workplace and going back to the old office will be hard, because it won't be as up to date as we are in terms of our adaptation. That's what I'm kind of wondering how it's going to be, is working digitally in a non-digital workplace is going to be fascinating. And I think going to be a culture challenge for us. Yeah. That's probably just a thought starter to end this. Any other thoughts? Everyone back in the office or going back soon?
Yeah, we're on and off, partial in, a few days a week. So and rotating staff in and out. But the social interaction is key. That water cooler moment and just catching up with the team face to face, as I did on Tuesday. We went for lunch. First time we've done that in 12 months. So nice you got to do those things.
With people in real time and in place. Right.
Yeah.
Here we are. Thank you so much for listening to us.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that, Catherine, Stuart, and Dan. I think out of all of the panels and keynotes that we've had over the last couple of days, yours was focused the most around sort of human change and basically that undercurrent of the human component in all things kind of digital transformation. You know, obviously putting aside AI, machine learning, technology, and all of the other whiz bang stuff, right? If you don't have the right people and secondly the right people on the journey, you're pretty much set to fail from day one. So thank you all again for your time. I'd like to just ask everyone to jump into the next studio. So please, I think it's in the top right corner. Just hit the leave button and join us for the next session, which will kick off at a little bit after 1:45 from Rajesh Vasa, who's the head of translational research and development from Deakin University. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.